The air felt thick, curdled. Not like smoke, not like perfume, but something stale and bitter, clinging to the expensive wallpaper. I remember the pattern on the wall, a subtle floral, almost invisible unless you looked closely. We'd chosen it together. Or rather, I'd chosen it, and he nodded, distracted, already thinking about his next deal. The silence after the words fell was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, squeezing the air from my lungs. "You're pathetic without me." He stood by the window, silhouetted against the fading light of a day I can no longer recall the color of. Gray, probably. Everything felt gray then. His posture was straight, confident, arrogant. The same posture that had first drawn me in, the promise of strength, of success, of a future built together. Now it was just a monument to his own inflated importance. The words weren't shouted, not even raised. They were delivered with the casual cruelty of someone swatting a fly, a minor annoyance easily dismissed. Pathetic. Without him. The phrase echoed in the sudden, vast emptiness of the room, of my life as I knew it. My own voice, when it finally came, was a stranger's whisper. A weak, reedy sound that seemed to confirm his assessment. I think I asked why. Why this? Why now? Why him? Why her? Why these words? He didn't offer explanations, not real ones. Just logistics. The lawyers would be in touch. The house. The assets. My share. It all sounded so clinical, so devoid of the tangled history of years, of shared dreams, of late-night talks, of building something from nothing. He looked past me, already gone, already calculating. Pathetic. The words settled deep in my gut, a cold, heavy stone. If you've ever felt like the ground beneath you just vanished, like the air itself turned toxic, maybe you understand. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. Our life had been, on the surface, everything you're told to want. A beautiful house in the hills, sprawling views, manicured gardens. Cars that were more status symbols than transportation. Weekends split between charity galas and exclusive country clubs. He was a rising star in his industry, sharp, relentless, charming when he needed to be. I'd been there from the beginning, supporting him, believing in him, often working just as hard behind the scenes, handling the details, smoothing ruffled feathers, providing the stability that allowed him to soar. My own career, a promising start in corporate strategy, had taken a back seat, willingly at first. His ascent felt like our joint project, our shared success. We were a unit, a formidable pair, or so I thought. I remember the early days. Dinners in tiny apartments fueled by ambition and cheap wine. The thrill of closing a difficult deal together, celebrating late into the night. The feeling of being invincible, two against the world. He would look at me then with a fire in his eyes, a mix of desire and respect. He called me his rock, his anchor. I built my identity around that, around being the woman beside that man, the silent partner in his empire. It was comfortable. It was safe. It felt like love. The signs, I see them now, were subtle at first. Longer hours that weren't just about work. A new, distant politeness replacing the old intimacy. The phone always face down. A change in his scent, a different cologne, lighter, more feminine? I dismissed them. Work stress, I told myself. The pressure was immense. He needed space. I gave it to him. I became an expert at not seeing, at not asking. I wrapped myself in the comfort of our routine, the predictable rhythm of our affluent lives. I was the keeper of the flame, diligently tending to a fire that had already gone out. And then, the fire became a blaze, consuming everything. The phone call I wasn't supposed to answer. A message notification on his laptop, left open just for a second too long. Her name. A name I'd heard before, professionally. Someone younger, sharper, more overtly ambitious. A colleague. The clichés are clichés for a reason. They are true. The confrontation was quiet, controlled. His lack of guilt was the most shocking part. Not remorse, but a kind of impatient pragmatism. This was simply the next phase. I was no longer necessary for his trajectory. The cruelty of his words wasn't born of anger, but of dismissive calculation. Pathetic without him. It was a judgment, a sentence. He genuinely believed it. He saw me not as a partner he was leaving, but as a dependent he was cutting loose. He saw himself as the source of my strength, my identity, my very ability to function in the world he inhabited. Without his reflected light, he believed I would simply fade away into obscurity, incapable of navigating the complexities he mastered. The house felt alien after he left. Every object, every corner, whispered of him, of us, of the future that was now a shattered mirror. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was deafening, filled with the echo of his parting shot. Pathetic. The word was a brand, seared onto my soul. I wandered through rooms I had carefully decorated, curated, filled with life. Now they were just empty spaces, monuments to a lie. The expensive furniture seemed to mock me, symbols of a wealth I hadn't earned, a life that wasn't truly mine, according to him. The early days were a blur of lawyers' offices, legal documents filled with cold, formal language dissecting a life into assets and liabilities. My lawyer, a kind but pragmatic woman named Eleanor, spoke in hushed tones about strategy, about negotiation, about preparing for a fight. A fight I felt utterly unequipped for. How do you fight someone who believes you are inherently weak? Someone who has convinced you, on some level, that his assessment might be true. I struggled with the most basic things. Getting out of bed felt like an insurmountable task. The simplest decisions, what to eat, what to wear, were fraught with a sudden, terrifying uncertainty. For years, he had been the decisive one, the leader. I had been the supporter, the consensus builder, the one who smoothed the path. Now, the path ahead was a jagged, unfamiliar landscape, and I was alone, without a map, without his guiding presence. The thought terrified me. Was I truly pathetic without him? The fear was crippling. It felt like confirmation of his words. Friends called, offering sympathy, inviting me out. But I shrank from their pity, from the questions in their eyes.
I felt exposed, vulnerable, stripped bare.
My identity had been so intertwined with his, with them as a couple. Who was I now?
Just me?
The question felt hollow, the answer uncertain. I spent hours staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations, searching for clues I'd missed, moments where I could have changed the course of events. It was an exercise in self-torture. The legal battles began to escalate. He wasn't just seeking a clean break. He was seeking dominance. He contested everything, dragging out the process, making unreasonable demands. It wasn't just about money. It was about power. He wanted to demonstrate, definitively, that I was dependent on him, that my future security rested solely on his magnanimity. His lawyers were aggressive, their letters filled with thinly veiled threats and challenges to my character. Eleanor warned me this would happen. His ego demanded not just victory, but annihilation. The financial pressure mounted quickly. Accounts were frozen, access restricted. The comfortable cushion I thought we had vanished into legal fees and his maneuvering. I had some savings, some investments from before, but they felt inadequate against the scale of the fight he was waging. I needed to find work fast. But the prospect of re-entering the corporate world after years away, with my reputation now entangled in a messy, public divorce, felt daunting. The whispers, the rumors, I could feel them without even hearing them. Everyone knew. Everyone was watching. And the word pathetic seemed to hang in the air of every potential interview, every networking event I forced myself to attend. He wasn't subtle about her either. Sightings became frequent. Photos in the society pages, a casual mention by a mutual acquaintance, even a carefully timed accidental run-in at a place he knew I frequented. They were a power couple now, young, vibrant, ambitious. She was often at his side, a bright, eager presence, the new model, sleek and updated. Each sighting was a fresh jab, a reminder of what he had discarded and what he had found. And each time, his words came back, a cruel mantra. Pathetic. Without me. There was a day, I remember it vividly, when everything felt like too much. The pile of legal bills on the kitchen counter seemed to grow exponentially each morning. A job interview I thought had gone well resulted in a polite rejection. My car broke down. It was a cascade of small, insignificant failures, but they felt like landslides against the fragile foundation of my life. I stood in the middle of the living room, the room where he had delivered his verdict, and I felt a wave of despair so profound it buckled my knees. I sank to the floor, surrounded by the ghosts of our past, and I cried. Not soft, gentle tears, but guttural, heaving sobs that shook my entire body. It felt like the end, like I was finally completely broken. And then something shifted. Slowly at first, like the tectonic plates beneath the earth. Maybe it was the sheer exhaustion of despair. Maybe it was the anger that finally began to burn through the layers of grief and fear. I looked around the room, not at the ghosts, but at the reality. This house, this life, it hadn't been solely built by him. I had contributed. I had worked. I had sacrificed. He hadn't given me this life. We had created it together. And if he could walk away and build a new one, why couldn't I? The word pathetic echoed again, but this time it sounded different. Less like a judgment, more like a challenge. He thought I was pathetic without him? Fine. I would show him. Not just survive, not just get by, but thrive. Not for revenge, not primarily, but for myself. To reclaim my own strength, my own identity. The parts of me I had let atrophy in the shadow of his ambition. The anger was a clean, sharp flame, cutting through the fog of sadness. It was a powerful, unexpected fuel. I got up off the floor. My legs were shaky, but they held me. I walked to the large window, the same window he had stood beside. I looked out at the view, not seeing the sprawling garden anymore, but the city lights twinkling in the distance. A city filled with opportunities, with challenges, with people building things. I had built things before. I could do it again. That night, I pulled out old files, old business plans, old contacts. The corporate strategy world. My world. Before I let it shrink. I had been good at it. More than good. I had a sharp mind, a strategic perspective, a knack for seeing the bigger picture. I had just applied those skills to his picture for too long. It was time to apply them to my own. The decision solidified over the next few weeks. I wouldn't just look for a job, I would build something. Something real, something mine. I reached out to former colleagues, people I trusted, people who knew my capabilities. Some were hesitant, wary of the drama surrounding my divorce. But others, the good ones, saw the fire in my eyes, the clarity of my purpose. They remembered the woman I was before, the one who could dissect a market, identify an opportunity, and build a winning strategy. I decided to focus on a niche I knew well, one related to my previous work, but with a fresh approach. It required funding, a team, sleepless nights, and a level of dedication I hadn't tapped into in years. It felt exhilarating and terrifying all at once. Every step forward was met with internal resistance, the ingrained habit of deferring, of supporting, of shrinking. But the memory of his face, his words, pathetic without me, pushed me forward. I would not be pathetic. Not anymore. The first few months were a relentless grind. Long hours in a rented, impersonal office space. Meetings that ran late into the night. Pitching the idea, facing skepticism, tweaking the plan again and again. Money was tight. Every penny counted. The contrast with my former life was stark, almost absurd. From chauffeur-driven cars to searching for parking meters. From catered lunches to instant noodles. But there was a strange sense of freedom in it, a shedding of the gilded cage. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings dragged on, a constant, draining undertow. His legal team continued their aggressive tactics, seemingly determined to wear me down. They questioned my financial decisions, my capability to manage my own affairs, even my mental state. It was designed to be humiliating, exhausting. It was designed to make me crumble, to prove his point. Eleanor fought back fiercely, but the emotional toll was immense. There were days I felt the despair creeping back in, the familiar weight on my chest. The temptation to just give up, to settle for whatever scraps he offered, was strong. And then there was her, the mistress. Now his official partner, moving into the life I had built. Seeing her in public, stepping out of the familiar cars, entering places that used to be ours, it was a constant, visual reminder of the betrayal, of the life he had chosen over me. She was everywhere, a silent, smiling presence in the background of my struggle. It wasn't just about losing a husband, it was about being replaced, erased. It fueled the fire, yes, but it also inflicted a deep, persistent wound. My company was slowly taking shape. We secured initial funding, a small but dedicated team. Our first project was promising, but the market was tough, competition fierce. There were moments of doubt, moments when the scale of the challenge felt overwhelming. The weight of responsibility for the small team I'd assembled, for the investors who had taken a chance on me, pressed down heavily. I was constantly on edge, analyzing, strategizing, anticipating pitfalls. Sleep was a luxury I rarely afforded myself. One evening, working late, the glow of the computer screen the only light in the office, a wave of loneliness washed over me. It wasn't just the absence of a partner, it was the absence of the shared journey, the easy camaraderie of building something together. My life was now defined by this solitary pursuit, this relentless drive. Was this what success looked like? A cold office, a growing bank account, and an empty space beside me? The pathetic feeling flickered at the edges of my consciousness. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was better suited to being a support system, a quiet presence in someone else's story. But then I looked at the numbers, the projections, the early results. They were good. Better than good. They were the result of my vision, my strategy, my sheer refusal to quit. This wasn't his success, or our success. It was mine. The thought was like a jolt of pure energy. It wasn't about proving him wrong anymore, not entirely. It was about proving myself right, about validating my own capabilities, independent of his presence. The next few months were a blur of activity. We landed a major client, secured a second round of funding, expanded the team. My company was growing, gaining traction, becoming a real player in the market. I was navigating complex deals, making high-stakes decisions, leading a team. I was using the skills I had honed and then set aside, and they felt sharper, more effective than ever. The strategic thinking that had helped him build his empire was now building mine. I started hearing things about him, too, through the grapevine. His company wasn't doing as well as it seemed from the outside. A few missed opportunities, a couple of risky ventures that hadn't paid off. The market was changing, and he was, perhaps, too set in his ways, too arrogant to adapt. The shine was starting to come off his star. And the mistress? She was still there, the trophy, but perhaps the gleam of the trophy was starting to dull. The idea didn't come overnight. It emerged gradually, a quiet possibility whispered in the back of my mind, growing louder with each success my company achieved, and each setback I heard his company was facing. It started as a hypothetical, a strategic exercise. What if? What if we leveraged our position, our growth, our funding, to make a move? A big move. What if we targeted a competitor? His company was a competitor, a significant one in a related space. An older, more established firm, perhaps ripe for acquisition by a newer, more agile player. The thought was audacious, almost terrifying in its implications. It wasn't just business, it was deeply, intensely personal. It felt like the ultimate answer to his cruel judgment. I ran the numbers, discreetly at first. I consulted with my most trusted advisors, presenting the opportunity purely on its strategic merit. The synergies, the market share, the potential for growth. I didn't reveal the personal connection immediately. They saw the logic, the potential value. It was a sound business decision. But for me, it was everything. It was the culmination of every struggle, every tear, every sleepless night. It was the chance to flip the script entirely. The legal battle was still ongoing, a tedious backdrop to my life. His demands hadn't lessened. He still operated from a position of perceived superiority, convinced that he held all the cards, that my newfound success was a temporary anomaly. He couldn't see the true strength I was building, the quiet power consolidating in my hands. He was blindfolded by his own ego, deafened by the echo of his own dismissive words. We started the process quietly.
Due diligence.
Approaching key stakeholders. Building the offer. It was a complex dance, requiring absolute secrecy. The corporate world is small, and rumors spread like wildfire. If he got wind of it too early, he could try to sabotage it. This had to be swift, decisive, overwhelming. The tension during this phase was immense. Every phone call felt loaded. Every email seemed potentially compromised. I felt like I was walking a tightrope stretched over an abyss. One wrong step, one leak, and everything could collapse. The weight of it was almost unbearable. I kept the personal motivation locked away, buried deep. To my team, to the lawyers, to the investors, this was a strategic acquisition, a bold business move.
And it was.
But it was also the crucible in which my resilience, my determination, my very sense of self was being forged. There were moments when the scale of what I was attempting felt insane. Taking on a company built by the man who had tried to convince me I was nothing without him. It felt like poetic justice, yes, but also like standing on the edge of a precipice. What if the acquisition failed? What if it financially crippled my own company? The risks were enormous. But the alternative, remaining the woman he had dismissed, the one who had been called pathetic, felt like a slow, agonizing death. The negotiations were intense. His board was initially resistant, loyal to the founder, the man who had built the company. But the offer was strong, compelling. Our company's growth trajectory was undeniable. The market was shifting, and his company, despite its history, was struggling to keep up. The numbers told the story. Our offer presented a way out, a profitable exit for them. I wasn't directly involved in the face-to-face negotiations initially. I directed the strategy, made the key decisions, but I kept a step removed, maintaining the professional distance. This was business. Cold, hard business. But every report I received, every update, felt like another step towards a moment of profound significance. The lawyers spoke of valuations, synergies, integration plans. I heard the quiet turning of tables, the approaching moment of reckoning. The offer was on the table. His board was considering it. The tension was palpable. I barely slept, my mind racing through every possible outcome, every potential obstacle. The silence from their side was deafening. Had they rejected it? Was he fighting it tooth and nail? I imagined him in boardrooms, railing against the upstart company, the one led by the woman he had left behind. The irony was a bitter tonic. Then the call came. From Eleanor, my divorce lawyer. She sounded
Surprised.
They accepted, she said, her voice a mixture of disbelief and excitement. His company. Your company is buying his. The words hung in the air, just like his had, months ago. But these words were different. They weren't heavy and cold. They were light, almost impossibly buoyant. My company. Buying his. The ground didn't vanish. It solidified beneath my feet. The air wasn't toxic. It was clear, crisp, invigorating. Eleanor explained the details, the formal acceptance, the closing process that would follow. It was happening. The audacious, terrifying plan had worked. I thanked her, my voice steady, calm. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long moment, the phone still in my hand. There was no wild exultation, no triumphant scream. Just a profound sense of quiet validation. This is where the twist comes in. The delicious, unexpected turn that business strategy and cruel words had orchestrated. I hadn't done this to him, not in a purely vengeful way. I had done this for me. But the consequence of my action reverberated far beyond just his professional ruin. News travels fast in our world. The acquisition was big news. The upstart company founded by the woman who had been quietly battling her high-profile divorce was acquiring the legacy firm built by her ex-husband. The headlines didn't need to spell out the personal drama. Everyone understood. The narrative wrote itself. The discarded wife rises from the ashes and buys her ex-husband's empire. I didn't see him immediately after the news broke. I heard things, of course, through former mutual friends, through industry contacts. He was blindsided. Utterly and completely blindsided. He had been so focused on the legal battle, on diminishing me, that he hadn't seen the real threat, the one I was building in plain sight. He had been so convinced of my pathetic helplessness that the idea of me becoming a formidable business rival hadn't even crossed his mind. His arrogance had been his undoing. The man who saw himself as the sun, around whom all others orbited, was now eclipsed by the person he believed was incapable of generating her own light. The real plot twist, the one that resonated deepest, wasn't his downfall in business, though that was significant. It was what happened with her, the mistress, the sleek, ambitious woman he had chosen. I found out through a casual encounter at a coffee shop. An acquaintance, someone who knew both of us, saw me and cautiously approached. After offering congratulations on the acquisition, she hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Have you heard about husband's name and mistress's name?" My heart gave a small, involuntary lurch. I tried to keep my expression neutral. "No," I said, "I haven't." "She left him," the acquaintance said, her voice laced with a mixture of gossip and surprise. "Right after the news about the company broke. Packed her bags and was gone within days." I blinked. "Left him." "Apparently," she continued, leaning in slightly, "when he lost the company. Well, it turns out his wealth was tied up in it. And his status. Everything he was, professionally, was that company. Without it, he wasn't the man she thought he was. He wasn't as successful, as powerful." She paused, then added, almost apologetically. She called him pathetic. The word landed with the force of a physical blow, but not to me. It landed on him, delivered by the person he had discarded me for. Pathetic. The very word he had used to strip me bare was now turned against him by the one he believed had replaced me. It wasn't just karma. It was a precise, devastating consequence of his own actions and her superficiality. He had valued status, power, and external validation above all else. And so had she. When he lost the source of those things, he lost her too. He was pathetic without his company, and she proved she was pathetic for it. The acquaintance rambled on for a few more minutes, offering details she had heard. He was reeling, financially exposed, his professional reputation in tatters. And alone. Utterly alone. The woman who was supposed to be his glittering prize had abandoned him the moment the gold turned to lead. I thanked the acquaintance, finished my coffee, and walked out into the busy street. The city hummed around me. People hurried past, engrossed in their own lives, their own struggles, their own small victories. I wasn't pathetic. I had never been. His words had been a lie, a projection of his own fear of inadequacy, of his reliance on external markers of success.
And she
had simply confirmed that she valued those external markers above all else. Their relationship, built on the shaky foundation of betrayal and ambition, had crumbled the moment the financial scaffolding was removed. There was no triumphant fanfare in my heart, no surge of pure, unadulterated glee. There was relief, yes, deep and profound. There was vindication, a quiet, satisfying sense of justice. But there was also a strange kind of emptiness. The years spent in that marriage, the pain of the divorce, the relentless struggle to rebuild, it had taken a toll. Victory, even one this complete, didn't erase the scars. It just meant I had survived the battle. My company thrived. We integrated his former business, streamlining operations, injecting new life and strategy. I built a strong team, people who believed in the work, in the culture of integrity and resilience we were fostering. I found my rhythm, my voice, my strength. I wasn't the woman beside the powerful man anymore. I was the powerful woman. I never saw him again after the acquisition, not face to face. I heard he left the city, disappeared from the circles we once inhabited. His name occasionally surfaced in business journals, usually in the context of cautionary tales. And her name, it vanished entirely from my radar. They were no longer relevant to my story. The house in the hills was sold. I bought a smaller place in the city, closer to my office. It wasn't a symbol of status, it was a home. A place where I could rest, recharge, and continue building. I learned that being alone isn't the same as being pathetic. It can be a space for growth, for self-discovery, for building something entirely on your own terms. I learned that true strength comes from within, not from the person you are with or the things you own. I learned that some people are drawn to success, while others are drawn to the person behind it. And the latter are the ones worth keeping. His words had been meant to break me, to diminish me, to ensure I remained in his shadow. Instead, they became the forge in which I was reforged, stronger, sharper, more resilient than I ever thought possible. He thought I was pathetic without him. But in the end, he was the one left standing alone, stripped of the very things he believed made him worthy, by the woman he had replaced me with. And I was just getting started. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.